This is now time for our weekly postcard from America with Professor John Christopher Bua, who's White House correspondent for Real Political News. Firstly, John Christopher, I had a range of things to talk to you about, but as you're aware, events, my dear man, things, as you may have heard, have taken a turn for the horror in our country. One of our MPs was murdered in his constituency. This won't be news or new to the political landscape or culture in America. You'll know and consequently remember what happened to Gabby Gifford. What I'm hoping, Prof. JC, is you can shed some light on that and what happened in terms of security for your congressmen and women after that event. Just remind us what happened to Gabby Gifford.
Yes, she was shot literally in a supermarket area, I believe outside in a parking lot, and she was maimed terribly and had to learn how to walk and speak again. And wonderful, articulate member of Congress, and her husband, Senator Mark Kelly,
an ex-astronaut, no?
Yes, indeed, he's an astronaut, and he's going to be again. He's probably will win again, and you know. I heard your tribute earlier and your lovely words with this author who has a beautiful voice. I think I'd like to get the book on tape from her and just listen to her speak. Yeah. Lovely speaking voice. But your tribute earlier was very moving, and we know what happened in the States to Sir David. And I've spoken to a few friends in the UK and few here who have said this is a tragedy, and we must not be tribal. We must not hate. As you said earlier, we must not use our differences as a way of wanting to destroy each other. This is wrong. I teach students, I teach them not to hate each other. You can disagree, but you don't have to hate each other. And I think it's important that we get this kind of message out. Political violence has a long history. Yeah. And I was in high school as a freshman when the priest came in and told us to take out our rosaries that President Kennedy has been killed. And I went home on the subway, and there wasn't one person, white, black, young or old, who wasn't openly bawling and sobbing all the way home on that subway train when I was in high school.
Prof. JC, so I reflect as well in recent history when President Reagan was shot, and he asked his surgeon whether or not he was a Republican, and the surgeon looked back at him and said, "Today we're all Republicans."
Well, he always had a good sense of humor, Ronald Reagan. I give him credit for that.
Just quickly, one of the discussions that are taking place here is the extent to which being able to see your representative, in your case, congressman or woman, or even your senator, face-to-face really does matter. Now, obviously in lockdown, that's happened through the prism of Zoom and other technologies. Do you think it is important for people in districts to be able to have that face-to-face contact with their representatives, or do you think it's just too dangerous?
For someone who's worked on every campaign of Bill Clinton's and Al Gore's and you name it, retail politics is key. Right. Shaking hands is key. Going door to door is key. You know, kissing babies is a cliche, but we must get out there and talk to the people who we want to vote for us. And we're having a big election here in Virginia. And Terry McAuliffe, who was the DNC chair and a personal friend of mine, is out every day trying to talk to people. And he's got Joe Biden and Jill Biden and Barack Obama all in his state of Virginia, because this is a key race that the Democrats must win. It's a bellwether race. So Terry is out there pressing the flesh, we would say. So I would say that, yes, it's key. And, you know, a very interesting thing. I saw a piece that literally 12 weeks, I believe, or months after President Kennedy was shot, the Secret Service allowed LBJ and Robert Kennedy to stand up in a limousine. This is madness. And I think we have to be aware of that. We also have to be aware of the fact that people want to know us from our hearts and our souls. And sometimes we can't do that over Zoom, except you and I can.
Yeah, Prof. JC, can I just ask you to reflect on something else? You know, regardless of how extreme somebody's politics might be or whatever political complexion they have, whether, I don't know, let's say you're Ted Cruz down in Texas or Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez and her district in New York, as a representative, you have to represent all of your constituents, regardless of their political complexion. And often when people reach out to you, they may have different politics, but they're reaching out to you as their representative because they don't have access to power. And you are their access to power. That's what representative democracy is. Do you think it's time that we got better at telling the stories, the day-to-day work that constituency MPs, that congressmen and women do, senators do on behalf of individuals? It's not just about kissing babies and winning office. They do hard work on behalf of people. And we forget to tell that story. Instead, we're constantly present in the white noise and anger of, frankly, a political discourse that's got worse and more polarized than ever.
I agree with you. I think that the candidates, I'm for just having candidates talk. Oh, and I like debates, by the way. And I just like the candidates to talk about what they would like to offer their constituents and what they've done and what they would like to do. Now, we have a situation here where in Texas, the school boards are now saying, this is how polarized it's become. Right. The school boards in Texas are now promoting the fact that there are alternatives to the reality of the Holocaust. We need to hear the other side about the Holocaust. I mean, this is outrageous. And this is how this country is becoming extremely polarized. And not only for my Jewish friends, but for myself and for so many people around the world are worried that, we're going to have that kind of neo-white supremacy again in this country. And it needs to be exposed, nipped in the bud. And then those people who are putting it forth need to be called to
and good education and people of goodwill on both sides who are prepared to listen and hear one another. And even though they can vehemently disagree, never forget, I never do, there was a time in American politics, there are countless examples of it, where though people espouse different philosophical, economic, political points of view, they were able nevertheless to work together and agree on a number of things. I think of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and the fact that when she was confirmed by the Senate, she was confirmed by every single person. I think there was one person that either abstained because they weren't there. Antonin Scalia, the quite literal legal darling of the right in America, also almost a unanimous vote. And look at it today, right?
And my friend, who nominated Ruth Bader Ginsburg, it was the chap who's not doing so well, but he's on the mend, who we were going to be talking about, Bill Clinton, who I worked for. Yeah. He nominated Ruth Bader Ginsburg for her place on the Supreme Court.
It's an interesting thing, that story, because I think, reading a lot about Bill Clinton, as I have, he wanted to nominate, I think, Cuomo, the ex-governor of New York, who didn't want the job. And then Ruth Bader Ginsburg's husband, Marty, really campaigned on her behalf and met Clinton, and he was sort of dazzled by her, as we all were. Bill Clinton is in hospital. He's being treated for an infection, but seemingly is on the mend. At the moment, in England, there's a kind of retrospective reevaluation of the work of Tony Blair. It's an interesting thing about Bill Clinton. And about his legacy. There are a number of ways of looking at it. Looking at, for example, some of his conduct, to say the least, in the White House, whilst he was president. Looking at it through a prism nowadays, it would be unthinkable for him, frankly, not to be cancelled. Certainly, when you think about what happened with Monica Lewinsky. The fact that he signed DOMA, Don't Ask, Don't Tell, but nevertheless, he seems to have maintained and retained a kind of popular appeal across the United States. And it's a really interesting thing. And sorry for the long-winded, rather unlettered question, but I wonder whether it comes down to this, Prof. JC. The late Sir David Frost, who you'll know from Frost Nixon, was once asked, and he'd interviewed everybody, who the most charismatic politician he had ever interviewed was. And without missing a beat, straight away, didn't have to think about it, he'd interviewed Mandela, the lot, every great of the 20th century and beyond. And he said Bill Clinton. And I wonder whether it's something to do with that.
I knew Bill Clinton. Right. I met Hillary Clinton in January of '92, and she convinced me to work on her husband's campaign, and I did. And I was down in Washington working for him out of the Democratic National Committee. I helped get him elected again in 96. And then he said, let's get that guy a job. What would you like to do? And I always thought, President Kennedy said politics and public service can be noble professions. And I said through a liaison, I said, tell the president I would like to work for him in his administration. And he appointed me to 3 communications jobs in 3 separate federal agencies.
Wow.
And it was the most glorious time of my life. And I will never forget, and he's a close by neighbor. And I will never forget many of the things that he's done. The economy soared. He did have, a few things that people held against him, but he was an amazing negotiator. He did so much with no Democrats or no Republican majority in Congress. First time in 40 years, he got so much done. Now, the only thing that there were so many things that were positive about him. And, gentlemen wanted to be him and women wanted to be in love with him, I guess. Right. People would stay here. But the fact is that the problem I had with Bill Clinton, among all the positive things, is that we could have won the election in 2000 with Al Gore. The fact is that Al Gore did not want Bill Clinton in his state, which was Tennessee, or he would not have him campaign for him in Arkansas, which was Bill Clinton's state. Right. And if he did, and for reasons of, his promiscuity or whatever, and Al Gore being a little holier than thou, kept him out of the campaign, and the Democrats would never have even needed Florida and those hanging chads.
Well, Prof JC, some people would argue that the Supreme Court decided that election, but
they did, but it wouldn't even have come to that.
Right. Well, one thing I want to I need Prof JC. I never want to interrupt you. Honestly, I could sit by a fireplace with you, as all of our listeners could, and quite happily, joyously listen to you all afternoon. One thing I do want to reflect on, something that you said before, was that Bill Clinton had to work with a hostile Congress. You'll remember, pretty hostile. This is a Congress that did attempt to impeach him. And in fact, there were articles of impeachment, and they did impeach him, albeit it never resulted in him leaving office. But there was another element. When he was working with Newt Gingrich, he had to find common ground. But, he also didn't have to be a president against a backdrop of social media and on Twitter, where there was the capacity, even where people vehemently agreed, quietly to sit and to work out the middle ground, or the capacity where there may be a way forward. I wonder, as you send us our postcard from America, looking at the landscape and just how polarized your politics and ours are, the extent to which social media really is influencing that.
Well, the social media of that time was talk radio, and the Democratic Party put me in charge of it. And they said, get people on talk radio, train these surrogates, get them to become I used to go on the Oliver North show. G. Gordon Liddy had it out for me. Rush Limbaugh had it out for me because I was a Democrat. But we got a real discussion on talk radio. That kind of vanished in some ways, not like your show, which is brilliant. But it was nasty. It was hostile. But then there is nothing like the savage social media that is going on both sides of the aisle. And I think that is unfortunate. And you know what the problem is? And I teach politics in the media to my classes. And I say, don't trust everything. Get a broad perspective. Don't listen to one person as the answer. Listen to other people. Keep your mind open. Listen to the people you don't like even. And let's get a real consensus, because as I always say, we either sink or swim together, and hopefully we can all swim together. And that's from a former lifeguard.
Prof JC, we either sink or swim together. Thank you so much for your postcard from America as we reflect on this tragic day. We can learn from everywhere, certainly across the pond. This is Rob Rinder. You're listening to Talk Radio, and I'm with you till 7 o'clock.